I would say it's a huge bonus to be back in the Olympics. I mean, that's obviously very helpful for us. And I think as you go through our strategic plan, we are going to explore what an under 23 team may look like and explore what an under 15 national team looks like.
Welcome to episode 259 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. It might be winter outside, but we've had no shortage of news to keep us dreaming about the spring, summer, and fall baseball seasons. So let's kick things off this week with a return of our news headline segment. Before we get to this week's guest, we begin with some Academy news. In case you missed it, the Medicine Hat Mavericks are partnering up with the Prairie Rose School Division to create the Mavericks School of Baseball. The program is being built for kids in grades 4 through 9 and will be available at different schools throughout the rural division around southeastern Alberta. Head to our website to read the story from James Tubb of the Medicine Hat News, and thanks to James for letting us share his story with us. Coming this fall as well, the Central Alberta Sox Academy will launch a high-performance program through the Dome in Red Deer. Program Director Harold Northcott will head up the 9-month program for students in the Central Alberta region looking to play college or professional baseball. Congratulations to Lethbridge's Torn Vasilinic as he's heading to the Welland Jackfish. The 2023 WCBL All-Stars coming off a great year with the Lethbridge Bulls, where he hit .288 with 12 home runs, 35 RBI, and 13 stolen bases in 50 games. Speaking of the WCBL, plenty of announcements are starting to roll in about commitments for the upcoming summer season. The Okotoks Dogs, Medicine Hat Mavericks, and Fort McMurray Giants are among the teams posting on social already, and I suspect we'll be seeing much of the same from other teams in the weeks ahead. A couple of big events are coming up that we'll be keeping tabs on. The Blue Jays Academy National Coaches Clinic is slated for this weekend at Weber Academy, and it'll feature last week's podcast guest Ernie Witt, as well as Pat Borders, Devon White, Ashley Stevenson, Chris Rietzma, and Buck Martinez. We plan to be in attendance, and we'll bring you some of those conversations in future episodes. And the Foothills Minor Baseball Association and Baseball Alberta are partnering up for the Girls Regional Super Clinic February 10th and 11th. That'll be held at the Cavalry FC Regional Fieldhouse in Alderside. It's also that time of year for fundraising banquets. Prairie Baseball Academy is holding its annual event February 3rd, which will include the inductions of Rob Greeno and Rob Watt into its Hall of Fame. The Vauxhall Academy of Baseball is holding its dinner, awards, and auction March 2nd with guest speaker Andrew Albers, and Neutral Hills Academy will have its event March 28th featuring former Blue Jays outfielder Vernon Wells. If you have an event you'd like us to shout out, drop us a line at albertadugoutstories@gmail.com. And finally, our hearts go out to all of those who knew, loved, and worked with veteran Edmonton sports journalists John Short and Robin Brownlee. Both were well known as writers and broadcasters who provided coverage of all kinds of sports, including baseball in the capital region. Both passed away last Thursday. Short was 86, Brownlee was 65. May both rest in peace. On to this week's guest, and Jason Dickson has a lot of work ahead of him as CEO of Baseball Canada. The organization set out its mission with a new 2023 to 2028 strategic plan with 3 key pillars: growth, development and performance, and organizational excellence. There's a lot to digest when you factor in athletes, coaches, officials, facilities, associations, hosting events, the national teams, marketing and communications, and more. But a few points did stand out to me as I read through the document a few times, leading to this great conversation about where baseball is at in Canada heading into 2024 and beyond. We also had some fun near the end of this, talking about his playing days, including with the Edmonton Trappers. This is Baseball Canada CEO Jason Dickson on Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. Jason, thanks so much for joining us here on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, there's a lot to get to as it was a busy 2023. So as you take that deep breath, I know you've been really, really busy lately and all year, frankly, but looking back at it with 2020 hindsight, how are you going to remember the year?
It was, I hate to say it, but we're still feeling kind of the effects of COVID and coming out. And as, sports kind of rebound, I think it was a lot busier than we all anticipated, right? Like coming out of it, we thought, maybe a couple of years ago, we're starting to get back on track, but coming out of it, it's still really busy. Baseball's growing. There's a lot of interest, a lot of things going on. So busy's good in our world, right? We obviously we much rather be busy than not. But it was pretty busy, and I think our provincial memberships, our PSOs, all our organizations felt the same way, even right down to the association. So busy is a good thing, but it was definitely a busy year for us.
in your eyes, looking back at it, what were some of the big successes and across the country? Was there anything that really stands out for you?
Well, you know what? I think from a national perspective, there's a couple things, and one, we're going to get into today. But for us, wrapping up a strat plan that we've been working on for a period of time, and finally, getting that approved by the board, and looking forward to getting that moving, that was fantastic for us. We hosted a stage two qualifier in Thunder Bay for the women's senior team. So that was a big event for us, hosting an international event on Canadian soil, which was huge. If you think way back, this was a WBC year, so our men's senior team was on the go as well. And back full steam, all of our national championships, rolling out a rally cap program nationwide in partnership with the Blue Jays. And so that's kind of back to that busy comment. Those are kind of some of the highlights from a national level. We've got a lot of things on the go, and a lot of really positive stuff for baseball too. And then obviously, the one component that probably gets a lot of discussion, or most of the discussion, is just around, our sport and safe sport and everything else that's happening with all the other sports, and what that means for us. And so all good work. But like I said, there wasn't just a couple, one or two things that were really big projects. We had a few on the go this year, but it's exciting stuff.
Mhm. Conversely, what do you see as maybe the biggest opportunity or thing you need to address moving forward?
I think it's that's a great question. And we identified a lot of things within our strat plan around continuing to grow the game. And I really feel that, with the excitement of how baseball continues to grow internationally, I think that opportunity is there for us. We're a country that has, a growing newcomer population, and a sport that is growing internationally. And so I think it's a good combo that'll really drive a lot of interest in the sport of baseball. Looking to always, increase membership numbers and keep our numbers up. I think that's probably the biggest thing for us is, for many years we've kind of introduced baseball to the same groups or the same communities. And I think what we're finding is, as demographics change, and more people come in who have never played baseball, there's a really good opportunity to introduce the sport, and see if we can't convince them to play some baseball.
Looking forward to it. Talking about that a little bit later on as well. Let's get into the strap plan. But back in the beginning, take us back to that, the original talk of, okay, let's think about this next 5-year cycle and what it all is going to pertain to. Did you have an idea as to where you wanted this thing to go, or did you go in with a completely empty slate and let the conversations guide where this thing was going to go?
You know what? It was interesting. I've done probably a dozen of these for varying organizations that I've worked for over the last 20 years. And I think the biggest challenge was, again, coming out of COVID, which hit kind of in the middle of our last strategic plan. So you're coming out of that, knowing that the plan you're working on, there's things that you were just behind on because you had essentially a 2-year freeze on some baseball activities, things that COVID changed forever that you weren't going to do, and trying to figure out, okay, what can we carry forward into the next plan, along with, how does this affect our sport, and where are we going to go? And now the good part is, we are, there are some staples within our sport, right? We know that we're going to deliver baseball, and coaching's a big part of that. Getting players active is a big part of that. Officials, recruiting all the volunteers, all those other elements. So those still remain true, that we need all those facets of it. But it's, it kind of got us to look at, okay, how do we deliver baseball differently, right? If we really, really want to grow the game, we know that like field capacity is going to be an issue if we really drive our membership. What are some ways that we can introduce the sport, at an introductory level that doesn't require a full-size baseball field? And how can we, leverage schools? How can we leverage court space, smaller space? And I think that went into some of the grassroots programming that we look at with like a baseball 5 or rally cap. You can run these programs and you don't need a full-size baseball field, and you can play it in just about anywhere.
Mhm.
So I think you're looking at some of those pieces. I think there's a large consideration into just delivery of information or education, how we used to feel like, okay, we got to do this in person, right? And now it's no, we don't,
Mhm.
right? And what can we do virtually? How can we be more efficient by doing it virtually? How can you maintain the integrity of what you're trying to teach is the challenge. I mean, I know you're at the, you talked about being at the university. That was, probably a huge challenge for universities at that time of trying to delivering education. So we faced a little bit of the same. And how do we how do we take the positive out of COVID and shape it to our benefit to go forward to say, to help us get our message out to the masses, but still be effective in educating and delivering information.
It's interesting you bring up the infrastructure piece because it's something that I didn't even think about when we were reading through the report. But living in a community myself, it's Airdrie, it's one of the fastest growing communities in Alberta. We struggle with space for recreation, whether it's be baseball or basketball or any other sport. How do you convince those grassroots communities to get on board and provide the space? Not just, as you mentioned, it doesn't necessarily have to be a baseball field, but even getting a few more fields, because here in Alberta, whether it's Sherwood Park or Lloydminster or others, Fort McMurray, they're all talking about how baseball's booming, and yet they might not have, whether it's the physical infrastructure or even the infrastructure in terms of coaches or umpires or those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So how do you get everybody on the same page and also get some buy-in from municipal partners as an example?
Well, I was just going to say that, we have a lot of discussions with municipal partners and municipalities because they're facing the same challenge of, okay, we have a limited budget, we have limited space, but we have a lot of demand. Like, how do we create spaces that can be used for multi-purpose, events? I mean, everybody would like to have a full-size baseball field, a full-size soccer field. We'd all love to have like a fourplex arena or what, like that's on everybody's wish list.
Mhm.
But it's about working with municipalities, local partners to figure out, okay, how can we be creative in creating some of these spaces? And like I said, with the programming for us, it doesn't necessarily have to be on a baseball field. A couple of our grassroots program can be in any open field. It can be on a soccer field. It can be in an indoor school, in a gym. It can be in the rink in the summertime when the ice is not in, right? And so we've created a couple of ways at the introductory level because that's really when you think about it, that's where you're going to get your mass numbers at the lower
Mhm.
level. We are cognizant though of understanding that the appeal to baseball is putting on the glove and getting out in the grass and being outdoors and all those positive things. But it's definitely a challenge for us. And we work with, municipalities, there's private partners that are still building facilities and some of the infrastructure that we can use as well or rent from them from time to time. But that capacity issue is definitely a challenge. We think about it as an NSO, but I know, municipalities, it's a bigger concern for them. And any opportunity for us to get in there and kind of pitch that if you've got an open spot and what are you thinking about doing with it? We're always in there from a baseball perspective because I think we definitely need to see more baseball fields. The game is continuing to grow and we need those fields for sure.
You touched on it a little bit earlier on. I wanted to get into the EDIA piece in particular, and we talk about getting more diverse voices out there. And I'll say getting out of our own comfort zones a little bit in attracting, whether it's players, whether it's officials, whether it's coaches to play the game. You mentioned the fact that Canada's growing and has a lot more of a diverse background behind it, new communities popping up all over the place. How much of the effort in the growth piece is going to be based on reaching out to communities that maybe weren't reached out to before?
It's huge for us. I mean, if you've had the chance to look through our strat plan, you'll see sprinkled throughout, the EDIA component around equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but like some of these, like a baseball five program, is exactly a program that we're looking at to go into areas of indigenous communities, if there's an opportunity to get into some lower economic places, newcomer, pockets, multicultural centers, YMCA's, Boys and Girls Clubs, like non-traditional spots where you might try to introduce baseball. Those are spaces that we haven't been in before. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to really go after and introduce, like some new people to baseball. And so I think, we really targeted that way when you look at our structure, we've never been into the territories, right? And so I
Mhm.
think that's another way that we're looking at, okay, how do we continue to go further north, and really try to get some introduce the game, get more people on board. So it's a big component for us. I mean, sport is sport, and I know some may look at it as it's leisure, recreation, or something to do on the side, but it really does mirror oftentimes, what business is doing. I mean,
Mhm.
because it is, if you ask our group, this is a business. We're running a business, and it's a business of sport that, similar to businesses are looking at, where do I find employees? How do I find new customers? I mean, there is a strong, a strong effort to really look at newcomer population. For us, we may not be looking for workforce, but we're volunteer driven. So it's the same idea, right? And so
Mhm.
while businesses are bringing in employees from, through immigration, we're looking to try to find volunteers and athletes, coaches, and all those others through immigration as well.
Mhm. I'm a big believer in success breeding success. And we here in Alberta are talking about how kids now believe that there's a realistic possibility of playing more meaningful baseball down the line, whether it's at a high level college or pro
Yeah.
level, that kind of thing. How much of the growth piece is going to be about singing the successes a little louder and trying to get the stories out there a little bit more and really highlighting some of the great things that are happening in this country?
Yeah, I always say you need to see it to be it, and I think from the hockey side, just because there's a greater number of players in the NHL, and we've got more teams that are based in the country, kids can kind of see somebody that's come from their hometown or maybe the next town over, or that's somebody's cousin, or they know, like there's a
Mhm.
connection that's made, and I think for us, we're starting to have more and more baseball players that are heading south, but also, still returning home as we do as Canadians to be part of the next round of development. So I think that's a huge piece. We've got a lot of good Canadian content that are helping back and giving back to the game. And I really think that's going to be important for us. Some of our alumni, are really starting to make some strides, and Larry Walker and Justin Morneau and the Joey Vottos and the Matt Stairs and all these others that are really starting to kick back and help with their community. I think that's very helpful, and we need to continue to push that. On the female side of our game, like it was a huge opportunity. Ashley Stevenson, who was the head coach for us last year, and had the opportunity to, sorry, 2 years ago, had the opportunity to go and coach with the Jays this year.
Mhm.
And that's a story for us that we've really tried to share and show our female athletes that there is an avenue through baseball, that there's an opportunity, and if you believe and you work hard, and you'll get that chance to get in and prove your worth. So I think those types of stories are good. Women's baseball in the Canada Games in 2025,
Mhm.
right? Probably a lot of people don't really know that. Either they figured it was always there or didn't know that women's baseball exists. I still get that. But it's a chance to get on a stage and show that, what, we play baseball as well. It's not just softball. And then no disrespect to softball, but I say women's
Mhm.
baseball. People say, "Oh, you mean softball?" I'm like, "No, women's baseball." So that lets us know that our messaging still needs to be more frequent and louder to let people know what we do and who we are.
Mhm. Speaking of, I look at the women's national team, the men's national team, and when you look at the strategic plan, there's an emphasis on growing that aspect of things and making sure that you're not just showing off the successes of both programs, but also growing on the success that they've had. What's next in your eyes to maybe take it to that next level to make sure that you're not just succeeding but exceeding expectations?
Yeah, it's our game it's an interesting game for us because we get measured as we go through the strategic plan. You're trying to figure out how, what does success look like? And there's
Mhm.
components of, um, specific to national teams, components of, okay, how are we doing at international events? I mean, that's always kind of one of the benchmarks. But when you're attached to a professional sport, you do have to look at, okay, how many players are we getting to college? How many players are we getting into the draft? How many players are in the minor leagues? How many players are getting to the big leagues? Because that is a measure of success as well. And and it's interesting because have a little bit of that challenge of our belief in Canada around long-term athlete development doesn't necessarily fit with creating a under 12 international team and competing.
Hmm.
But we're measured, right, by having a U12 team. We currently don't have one, and not participating in those events, you lose points, which means your international standing goes down. So it's a bit of a catch-22 trying to make sure that we develop long-term for athletes, which is what we're really trying to do to give them the best chance to be successful, and make sure that we're still achieving at the highest levels on the international stage. I would say it's a huge bonus to be back in the Olympics. I mean, that's obviously very helpful for us.
Hmm.
And I think as you go through our strategic plan, we are going to explore what an under 23 team may look like and explore what an under 15 national team looks like. And I think, just having some more kids into the pathway will kind of help create that interest. And then, I say it all the time. We get focused sometimes. We're almost like two levels. Well, the provinces cover the middle part. We really work on the upper piece, which is our national teams, but then we need that base of grassroots, right? And that's the rally caps, the baseball fives, the good coaching for the coaches. You need that base of athletes, get everybody playing baseball, and through the masses, the excellence will kind of rise to the top, but you need a good solid base, and you got to give every opportunity to every player who has an interest in playing the game. And who knows, right? Like
Hmm.
I think we all played on teams that I wasn't the best player in my team when I was a kid, and it worked out in the end. So I mean, you never know where you're going to get your best players from.
Hmm. You talked about the exploration piece, and it segues really well into my next train of thought, which is around the national championships. You talk a lot about the elevating, say, the 16U or the Canada Cup as an
Yeah.
example. But there's one exploration piece that I found interesting, given that Alberta has a lot of them, and that's an Academy National Championship. We've got Vauxhall, we've got Okotoks, we've got AHP, Weber, St. Joe's. List seems to go on and on here. What do you think it'll take to make this idea and exploration become a reality?
It's a good question. I mean, we get asked that one a lot because I think there is an appetite for that academy versus academy type of championship. I know there is. There's been a lot
Hmm.
of discussion around it. For us, Baseball Canada, we've always been kind of age class, province on province. The academy definitely brings a different feel to it because, while as you mentioned, there's a lot of academies in Alberta, it's not all just Alberta players,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot of flow across the country from players moving all over the place. So I think, it is one thing that we definitely need to look at, to see if there's an opportunity. And I just think, in the spirit of competition, I think some of these academies would love to maybe tackle each other and see who is the best. And so I think it would make for a really good product, and it would be something I would be interested in for sure as Baseball Canada.
Hmm. It'd be interesting as well to see how they not only stack up against one another, but maybe help augment maybe the efforts that are being undertaken, whether it's the junior national team as an example, or I know there's a lot of in September comes the Canadian Future Showcase as an example. You mentioned the Jays earlier on, and a lot of people talk about how where the Jays go, the game in Canada goes. So how much
Yep.
of this is threading needles and making sure that everybody's swimming in the same direction kind of thing?
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point. It is a challenge for us. When you go through that strat plan exercise and identifying the challenge is, as the sport grows and the interest grows, so does, the internal competition. Like from a Baseball Canada perspective and baseball in this country, the more people that are playing, like that's fantastic. But you're right, as far as trying to get everybody kind of going in the same direction or at least thinking the same things, it's tough because you have competition with academies, you have competition with players going to the States, you have competition with other sports. So I mean, there is a role there for Baseball Canada to kind of be maybe the conductor of all this and kind of guide some people, or at least make sure the opportunities are clean, and that our athletes get the best chance to be the best that they can be. It is a challenge. I mean, I
Hmm.
think that's the world of sport is definitely. I think if you talk to any provincial executive director, or you talk to any national sport body CEO, or even at the college level, the competition for athletes and the expectation from athletes and the expectation from parents is getting higher and higher and higher. So it's creating a few more challenges, but they're good challenges for us.
Mhm. Looking at the strategy as a whole, what's the feedback been so far from your provincial partners and associations? Because it seems as though there's an element of this where you need buy-in from them to really make this thing go so you meet your targets in 2028.
The good part for us with the strat plan, we started this about, we had these initial conversations about a year ago, and a lot of what we did is hired an external consultant to come in and really help us with us, and that process started with a lot of engagement from stakeholders, right? Meetings with the executive directors, meetings with the provincial coaching coordinators, meeting with the high performance coaches in each of the provinces, meeting with athletes from across the country. And so we really made sure we had, the voice from everybody across the country and all the different groups that make Baseball Canada go. So it wasn't just a small group at the board level kind of putting together a plan and saying, what do you think? It's really built on a lot of things that they have come up with. And so as we gained all that stakeholder feedback, a couple different sessions where we really prioritized what was important to everybody. So the voice from the stakeholder is very clear in the strat plan as I look at it, because just knowing the conversations that were had and where the different ideas came from. And, it's hard to satisfy everybody's idea, and every individual may not look at it and say, well, my idea was ignored. But you've got a lot of, building consensus and a lot of common threads and themes that you get from the feedback. And I think, if you're a stakeholder that was part of this process, you can see your mark on this strat plan. And you're right, like, it only goes if they feel that there's an engagement level, and they can see the things that are important to them in there. So that process may have been a little different maybe than we've done in the past. I think maybe we've built some and then kind of then asked about it and then maybe made a few changes. But this one was built from the ground up, in a completely different approach for us, and really getting out to stakeholders. And really with our own board kind of having the last meeting and say on what they think they would like. It was really a lot of stakeholder engagement, which was positive. It's time consuming.
Mhm.
It was definitely taxing, and I'm sure, felt like it was taking longer than it should have. But if you understand the purpose and stay true to what you want to actually capture, which is, sometimes, you may not agree with certain things, but as you start to see it come forward and get shaped, you realize, what, maybe my thinking needed to be changed a little bit. New ideas, things you never thought of, right? Like, some of the best ideas come from, the people we never ask. And so we wanted to make sure we really asked everybody for their input and what they wanted to see from Baseball Canada.
The strat plan has a little bit of everything, I think, in it, whether it be from the on-field product to the coaching to the umpiring to the business side of things. Gaze into your crystal ball a little bit and take us to 2028. You obviously want to achieve everything here, but is there one thing or one aspect of it that you really, really want to achieve or see happen the most?
I think we would be most proud at the end of 2028 if you looked at Baseball Canada and you could see a unified sport across the country that was, was diverse, was in tune with community, was, the perfectly safe sport, like the things that we're dealing with, competitive, still kind like we are as the country of Canada, but fierce on the international level. We see a lot more girls playing baseball than we have now. Continue to see a lot of our players still get to the big leagues. And really just a lot of new people introduced to baseball that have continued to play baseball or coach baseball or volunteer with our sport. I think we're really trying to grow our membership, and I think that's the one piece that would make us the happiest, is just an embracement of baseball and see our membership grow.
Fantastic stuff. I got a couple more for you. End this
Yeah.
thing on a bit of a fun note. Take us back to 1991. We had Joe Young on the podcast a few weeks
Yeah.
back,
Yeah.
and he was the young buck on that team. You and Stubby Clapp, he
Yeah.
name dropped. What do you remember about Joe Young, one, and two, what do you remember about that 1991 team?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like that's a long time ago, but it's very clear to me. Like, and I find it funny because it's a lifetime ago for me. I mean, it was my pre whatever I'm doing now, like when you actually had a different life as a player, and that tournament was interesting because like where I was in my career at that time, and I talked with John Haar later, who was our head coach at the time, and found out like I was the last cut or the last pick on the team,
Mm,
right? You have no idea where you are as a kid. I mean, I looked at that group of players and I knew I was good. I knew it was from the East Coast, but it was you have no real idea of how good you are, where you fit in. And so for the most part, I was just happy to be on the team,
mhm,
right? And get to that situation, we get there and I remember Joe being the young guy. Mike McKinley was another one. He was a bit of a younger guy on the team from BC and I from in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna hopefully get some innings and I'll kind of fit in wherever I can fit in and do what I can do. And if I get in at bat here or there, it's like, yeah, I'm just happy to be here. And it was a dream to play for your country. And you're 18 years old, so you're all pretty young and a little naive to everything. But I do. It's funny when you talk about Joe because he was young, like he was 2 years younger than us. And you say,
mhm,
well, 16 to 18 is not a big deal, but it is at that age, right? Like he was just a kid, but big guy, good arm, right? He could really throw it and I remember just watching, you're like, yeah, this guy's good, right? Like, you
mhm,
knew you're pretty good yourself, but you're watching someone, you're like, this guy's pretty good for being 16 and then, probably the other part I just remember about him was just always kind of loose and easy going. And Joe is just Joe, right? Like, didn't seem
mhm.
like anything really bothered him. And I'm like sweating bullets or like, biting my fingers down. And Joe was always pretty easy going. But yeah, it was great times. Like good group of guys. Like I think about all those guys. I went on to play college with a couple of them and pro ball with some others and kind of, still talk to a lot of them now and see some of them now. But again, we winning a gold medal that year on home soil, it gets better, I think, every year I'm away from baseball. And now at Baseball Canada, I realized like that wasn't easy to do. It's never been repeated.
Mhm.
And you realize how hard it actually is to win a gold medal at an international level for Baseball Canada. So very, very proud of that moment. And for on a personal level, for me, it was a tournament. I had a big game against the US. And it kind of really was the springboard to get me from there to the next opportunity, to the next opportunity. And what's crazy about it, and I tell this to all the kids as I go, like in 1991, I'm the last player on the team. I'm not even sure if I should be there. I'm not even sure what my role is. I'm just happy to be there. And 5 summers later, I'm in the big leagues.
Mhm.
And you just never know, right? You continue to work hard, take every opportunity, and who knows what can happen, right? And so it was fun. But yeah, I you know what, still keep up with Joe on Facebook and talk to guys. We talk to guys and yeah, it's miss those guys every day. It was great. It was a great time and it was a great time for an 18-year-old.
Very cool. I know you mentioned the fact that you never know where you're going to end up. You ended up back in your home country for a little while in the minor league system as a member of the Edmonton Trappers. What
Yeah.
do you remember from that time and getting to play on Canadian soil and be the Canadian on that squad?
You know what? I always love coming back to Canada and I love all the cities, love Edmonton, love, nothing bad to say that way. I was in a point of my career where I was trying to rehab and I was not a good player. And I remember just seemed like I got shellacked every time I went out and pitched when I was in Edmonton. So, well, I was back there. We were there last fall for our convention and it was on much better terms, but I didn't have a lot of success in Edmonton when I was coming back.
Talk a little bit about just the journey as a whole for you, and not just from a playing perspective, but also now being a big part of the grassroots growth of the game, and some of the highlights, some of the memories, some of the things that really stand out to you as you've gone from point to point to point.
Yeah, I I visited my high school 2 days ago. I was asked to come back and speak for, to all the athletes just around, dealing with adversity and the journey and some of those. And one of the things I talked about, which was a little bit off topic, but I talked about, the part of baseball or sport that I probably love the most is the ability to travel and the people that you get to meet, right?
Mhm.
And I think, I can remember places we played and, games we've won and things like that. But I just, you remember all the great people that you meet along the way and the memories that you build. And I think that's probably the one thing that, you cherish the most out of it is just some of the friendships and some of the really good times, because you're all in it together, whether it's in the minor leagues and it's a rough go, or when you get to the big leagues and you're competing to try to win a World Series, right? And so I think that piece is a little bit of a separate by itself, but purely baseball, 91 championship that we won. Um, we won the Northwest League my first year that I played in 94 with the Boise Hawks when I was with the Angels. Had obviously getting to the big leagues in 1996 with the Angels, 97 All-Star game, 2003 Olympic qualifier, 2004 Olympics with Team Canada, playing for Canada again for the second time. And, um, I've just, I feel very fortunate, right, for the things
Mhm.
that I've been able to accomplish and the things that we've won along the way. And just, you dream of being a big league baseball player. I did. My mom jokes that I was kind of every year it was firefighter, astronaut, baseball player. And I'm sure every kid wrote that down, but to actually do it, was a dream of mine. And you're going to big league ballparks, you're playing against guys that you have posters of on your wall. You are, playing in the same spots that Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams, it's each road trip was like a vacation, right? Except
Mhm.
this is your day-to-day job. And it's just amazing. Like every memory is still clear to me of everything that you like, people you've talked to and places you've gone. But just very fortunate, right? Like I think it's a lot of people have that dream, but to actually live it, I realize, I don't think about it often, but when people ask me the question, I start to talk about it. I realize I was pretty lucky. I was pretty
Mhm.
lucky.
Got a couple more for you. This one should be fairly short. Thinking about back on the playing career, who's the one guy that made you go, uh-oh? Whether it was an opposing pitcher or maybe
Yeah.
a batter that you knew you had to face that day, who's the one guy that made you kind of think twice about this whole career that you were chasing?
Easy. Edgar Martinez with the Mariners. I think from like a statistical standpoint, you would look at, I say that, and somebody will look up the numbers and they're like, well, it's a problem. Like, he was, I don't know what he was. I don't think he hit very well. Like
Mhm.
average wise, like numbers wise, I don't think it was great. I don't know if he ever missed a ball that I threw. It seemed like he crushed everything. And whether it was either at my head and I caught it, or it was a line drive at where my fielders were. But that I don't think I got him out, but I feel like I never got him out.
Right.
He was so tough on me. He was tough. And then of course, the other guy that I think gave everybody fits, and he got me obviously on my first pitch. Derek Jeter was never an easy one to go after as well, right? But
Mhm.
Edgar Martinez, hands down. Everybody asked me that. It was him. Like it wasn't McGuire, it wasn't Bonds. I did say Jeter, but it wasn't Jeter, it wasn't A-Rod, it wasn't, like it wasn't those guys. But Edgar Martinez, I felt like I had no solution for. He owned me. Like I was tough.
Very cool. And of course, an Alberta connection there as a former Calgary Cannon for a few years there in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah.
Jason, final question for you. It's one we ask everyone. What does the game of
Yep.
baseball mean to you?
For me, like I'm sure everybody says it's their life, but like literally, I think it's been my life, right? Like from playing all the way through to the junior team to working, to playing pro for all those years, to the Olympic team, to coming back to working for baseball New Brunswick, a little bit of switch to sport New Brunswick, but still dealing with baseball, to coaching the junior national team, to being a volunteer for many, many years on the board for Baseball Canada to now becoming the CEO. Like I can't imagine a part of my life that doesn't have baseball in it.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate the time, Jason. As always, a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast, and all the best in 2024 and beyond.
Thanks, you too. Take care.
Thanks again to Jason Dickson for joining us this week, and thanks to all of you for downloading and listening. If you haven't already, leave us a rating and review, as those actions help spread the word about ADS, and make sure to subscribe, as we have new episodes dropping every Thursday. As always, a massive tip of the cap to our Platinum supporters for all they do for us and for baseball in Alberta. The Okotoks Dogs and AHP Academy have been incredible partners with their generosity, which helps us tell the game stories in our province. For more on our teammates and sponsorship program, head to albertadugoutstories.com/supporters. Until next time, thank you for all of your support online, on social, and on air of Alberta Dugout Stories.